Hi everyone, today I want to talk to you about Federico da Montefeltro, which if you don't know who he is, you actually do know him, you know his face, you just maybe don't know what his name is. Okay, I am going to be cooking today. I'm making a stew and making it for this evening, so that definitely needs to happen. And I'm using this fennel, which has seen better days, so I'm going to cook it rather than feed it raw to my kids because it's kind of half manky. Okay, so Federico da Montefeltro. Federico da Montefeltro, you know, when you go to the Uffizi, it's, or maybe even if you haven't been to the Uffizi, which is this like big gallery in Florence, you've probably seen the image, which is a typical image from the Renaissance period, where there's these two people looking at each other. It's two profile portraits. There's a woman looking at a man. It's like on two different boards, okay? And so yeah, it's basically these two portraits of these man and woman looking at each other. And it's a very traditional image that is associated with the Renaissance. If you actually go and see this work of art in the Uffizi Gallery, you see that there's actually two paintings on the backside of this as well. So there is, it kind of is a bit of a story that's told also on the back, all right? So Federico da Montefeltro is the dude in this painting, and you see him a lot. Like if you travel through Italy and see other galleries, you will see other paintings with this guy portrayed there, okay? And he's always portrayed in profile, so you never see a portrait of him from the front. And I will tell you that in a moment, so keep watching the video if you want to find out the real gruesome reason why you only ever see him portrayed in profile. So obviously, if you see him in all these portraits, you know that he is a lover of the arts and someone that commissions a lot of artwork. So definitely a very cultured man of the Renaissance. He's also a great condottiero, a great leader in combat as well. So that's another thing that he's really known for. So he's really balancing these two sides, like the warrior and also the very educated kind of person which is fascinated with the Greco-Roman antiquity, with the arts, and that invests a lot in this as well. So he actually, one of the things that he's most famous for is creating a library during the Renaissance period in Urbino, because he is the Duke of Urbino, which is second just to the Library of the Vatican, okay? So he is a great book collector in a time in which, as I've said also in another video, collecting books is not something inexpensive because the printing press hasn't been invented yet. So at this point, books are handmade, handwritten, hand illustrated. So to collect them means, I almost cut my finger off there. To collect them is no small ordeal, and it's very, very expensive, okay? So where do we want to start? So let's talk a little bit about the family in general. So they didn't start out as the Dukes of Urbino. They started out as this family which was like an aristocratic family, but not a very powerful one, not a very rich one, in Montefeltro. And they make their money by being, can you hear me if I'm cutting this at the same time? Okay. They become famous and powerful by being these great leaders in combat. So we're talking about the late Middle Ages at this point, and they are condottieri. So they are basically, they have these armies which are like mercenary armies, and they go and then they have these little armies that then go and fight for other powers like Florence. They end up also fighting for the Vatican as well, for the Pope. And they make a name for themselves. They become very rich by doing this. So his dad, Guidantonio da Montefeltro, is already like a leader in combat. So this is something that runs in the blood in the family, okay? I say his dad. We're not really sure if Guidantonio is his dad or if Guidantonio is actually his grandfather and just doesn't want to say that his daughter had a kid outside of wedlock, and so it basically makes it look as if it's his son and he adopts him as his son, okay? And he, in any case, he's recognized as being an illegitimate son of Guidantonio, okay? And we're not really sure who his mother is either, so we're not sure about anything. We just know that at one point, he is recognized as being an illegitimate son of Guidantonio. And so he gets sent away when he's only like 6 or 7 years old from the family home. because his father has a legitimate son with a woman he's married. So that is going to become the guy that inherits everything, and he goes off to live outside of the home. But it's not like he's abandoned or anything. He's still having, living a great life. And during these years, he actually gets a great humanistic education. And this is what brings him to be a great fan of the arts and of literature and of philosophy and things like this, and a great patron of the arts. He's one of the greatest patrons of the Renaissance period, a little bit like Pius II that we talked about in another video, okay? So later on, he actually ends up becoming the heir to his father, because his brother, the legitimate heir, gets killed by a conjura. How do you say conjura? Conjure is like when you make magic. Conjura. Google. Conspiracy. So, conspiracy that probably involved one of these as well. Oh, it did involve one of these, because I know that he was slaughtered like a pig, really. It was really bad. His brother was killed in a conspiracy, and he makes a big deal about saying that he was not involved in the conspiracy at all, but he finds himself, he was supposed to be so far away, kilometers and kilometers away, when the conspiracy happened. But then just after the conspiracy, he turns up and is like, oh, let me kill the conspirators. Although one of the conspirators actually ended up having a very important position when Federico takes the place of his brother. He gives one of the conspirators a very important place. So everyone's kind of side-eyeing this in history, because it's kind of likely that he was involved in the conspiracy. But it sounds like his brother was not very good at his job, so we're absolutely fine with that. So he takes the place at the leadership of Montefeltro, and later becomes the Duke of Urbino. Okay, so he won't become the Duke of Urbino until later, like in the 70s, in like 74, I believe. He was born in like 1422, so he won't become the Duke until much later, the Duke of Urbino, okay? But still, he's an aristocrat, and he takes the place of his dead brother and becomes, the leader of first of Montefeltro and then of Urbino. Now, he's only like 15 when he gets married the first time. And the woman that he gets married to is like 5 years older than him, and she owns a lot of land. So by the time he's in his 20s, he's already owning a lot of land. And when he's 16, he's already at the head of his own army, at the head of 800 soldiers, okay? So he's a leader in combat, which is very good. He famously lost very, very few battles, but that's also because sometimes he'd like walk out before it was too late, so it could not be said that he lost. Like there was the famous Battle of Anghiari, which was fought between a coalition that involved also Florence and the Visconti, and he would have been on the losing side of that. The Battle of Anghiari is actually, the Battle of Anghiari, right? So the Battle of Anghiari was actually, we are supposed to have had a really beautiful painting of that by Leonardo da Vinci, but Leonardo da Vinci botched it, so we only have a sketch of that. And maybe we should finally do a video about Leonardo da Vinci, or a few videos about Leonardo da Vinci. I feel like we've been putting this off for a while. Let me know in the comments if you want to watch, if you want me to make a video. I'm putting my knife at you as I'm telling you, so let me know in the comments if you want to know more about Leonardo da Vinci. I feel like I've been putting it off because there's so much to say about it, but I'll try to be, if I do make a video about it, I promise I'll try to be concise, okay? But getting back to us, so he actually didn't want to be part of that because he knew he would have been on the losing side. So he does that a lot. He's like, I don't know if I want to fight this battle and then it become part of a bad part of my resume kind of thing. So getting back to us though, at 16, he's already has his own army, okay? So he becomes a very, very strong condottiero with lots of great wins, and he gets a lot of really good jobs because he makes such a good name for himself, okay? His first wife dies quite early on, and he marries again. I believe he's in his 40s when he marries again, and he definitely cares a lot. He'll have 8 children between various wives and lovers and stuff. But his second wife, which is Battista Sforza, he cares about her a lot, a lot. And so she is very much celebrated by him, and her death will touch him so very much, and he will visit her tomb every week for the rest of his life after that she dies. Okay, after she dies, actually giving birth to a son. And so I'm saying this because this event, we kind of see it in two paintings, which are the most famous paintings that we associate with him. And they're both by Piero della Francesca. Now, the one that's at the Uffizi, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, has him and Battista Sforza in it. And you can already see that he has this very recognizable profile that ends up on coins as well, that he's famous for. Now, this profile is not the profile that he was born with, okay? Because when he was about 30 years old, during a joust, okay, una giostra, a joust. So it's basically fighting, but for play. It wasn't like a proper combat for like military reason. It was just like a sports combat of sorts. A lance ends up in his eye, and it takes away like the upper part of his nose and his eye. All right. So the reason why he's always portrayed in a profile is that, and with that very recognizable profile, is that he literally doesn't have an eye on the other side of his face. So rather than being portrayed without an eye or like having people paint the eye in, he's like, okay, let's just have me painted in my good profile. Okay. If you ever see him like on the other profile, it's just because they've like literally mirrored the good profile he has. Okay. So he is missing truly an eye and this upper part of the nose because it was taken away by the lance too. Okay, so pretty cool that he survived that in a way. So this painting has him on one side, and the backdrop is land, like actual land that he owns. Okay, and on the other side we have Battista. Battista, in this portrait, she is she's very, very light-skinned, which was fashionable at the time for women to be very, very light-skinned. Also, she has a very high forehead, but she's almost unnaturally light-skinned, and this is because when this is painted, she's already dead. Okay, so it's kind of like talking about the fact that she's dead, right? So on the back of the paintings, you see again the same two characters, which are on chariots, which are being led to each other, to meet each other, okay? As they are kind of being led to marry each other. So it's obviously not after she's dead, it's like before, okay? And here there are some symbolic characters which are telling us something about the two main characters, all right? So he's obviously in shining armor because he looks, he's this great condottiero, he's this great leader in combat, so he's kind of celebrating himself. In fact, underneath there's this piece of writing that's saying, oh, this guy's so famous because he's so good and glorious at combat and so forth, kind of celebrating himself. Although traditionally, we think that this was commissioned by him to Piero della Francesca, which is the painter. But there are also some historians that say that probably it wasn't commissioned by him himself, but commissioned by someone else about him and about his wife, which would kind of be a little bit less cringy, the fact that he's been like openly celebrated in this phrase underneath. So the people that are on his chariot, so we have like a little personification of love with a little child with the wings, like Eros, the god of love. And then we have virtues. So something that was very typical during the Renaissance, but also during the late Middle Ages, was to have personifications of virtues. And the virtues were like, there were some specific virtues which were recognized as being like the cardinal virtues, which are 4. The cardinal virtues are temperance, fortitude, so strength, and temperance and prudence. And so he obviously has those 4 virtues represented on the chariot. So for example, fortitude, strength is the one with the column. The column, the lady, whenever you see a lady with a lion or holding a column, a broken column, often it's the personification of strength, fortitude, okay? She, on the other hand, the lady on the other side, so Battista Sforza on the other chariot, she is being, the chariot, first of all, is been led not by horses, but by unicorns. Now, unicorns are a symbol of basically purity of virginity. So whenever you see a lady with the unicorns, it means basically that she is a virgin, which is obviously in those times ideal if you're going to marry a woman, is to underline the fact that she is a virgin, okay? And on her chariot, we have, again, 4 people, and these are the 3 theological virtues. The theological virtues are charity, faith, and hope, okay? But then there's a 4th virtue, which is temperance, okay? So basically it's saying she has these 3 theological virtues plus an extra one, which is temperance. Now, what I find interesting here is that the virtue of charity, which is also often doubled as love, basically, usually charity is a woman with babies. Here, it's a woman with a pelican. Now, the pelican is a symbol which is often used also to symbolize self-sacrifice. Often it is used to symbolize Christ as well. And because there was this concept that the pelican kind of, I don't know if this actually happens in the natural world. I bet it doesn't. It's just like humans that came up with this weird idea. But there was the idea that pelicans like peck at their own breast and cut themselves up to bleed so that their babies can drink the blood of the mummy pelican, okay? So for this reason, you will see the pelican feeding the baby pelicans with its own blood in many crosses as well. You see this symbology. And here it is, you know, the charity and the self-sacrifice of motherhood, the reason why we have it on this chariot, okay? So it's basically a way of singing the virtues of this woman who has passed away and who was a great mother, a great wife, and a virgin before she got married, obviously, and all of these things. And this is we're gonna see this celebrated again in another painting in a moment. Underneath, there is a piece of writing underneath this part of the painting as well, talking about how this woman's virtues will make her famous forever and she'll be on the mouths of everyone. And it is also, she is adorned with the glories of her husband. So in some way, we're also celebrating the husband under here as well, because, you know, the man always has to be celebrated more. So I told you there is another painting also by Piero della Francesca that is for sure commissioned during a similar period by Federico, and it's celebrating, it's a gift. It's supposed to go on an altar, and it's to thank Mary for giving him this son. And in fact, there's Mary with the baby in her arms, thanking her for giving the son, but there's also a little bit of an element of sadness because he's also lost his wife. And it is famous because on top of Mary, hanging on top of Mary, well, first of all, there's this dome on top of Mary, which is in the shape of a shell. And it's supposed to be a reference to Venus, because often there's this idea that there is a connection almost between the worshipping of Venus in ancient times and the worshipping of Mary in modern times, okay? And then hanging down from this shell, because you know that Venus was born from a shell, not born from a shell, but like she was born from the sea, and she arrived to the shores like riding a shell. If you want to know more about this, watch my episode on the Venus that was stolen by Napoleon, okay? So there's this shell over the top of this Mary, and hanging there is this egg. And the egg symbolizes is a connection to the story of Leda, who also was made pregnant by a god, as was Mary made pregnant by the Christian God, okay? And because he fertilized the egg when he came as a swan, okay? Maybe we should make some episodes on like weird Greek mythology, but basically Zeus transforms himself into a swan and gets Leda pregnant and fertilizes this egg. And there's also basically a reference to just the perfection of the egg, which is the perfection of the creation of God, okay? And it's also connected to the fact of the fertility. It's a symbol of fertility and the fertility of Battista Sforza, who died but did bring forth the heir of Federico. So a lot of very complex references here, but definitely the egg plays a very important part in this painting because it's hanging right on top of Mary, okay? And again, we have Federico in armor, this great leader in combat, in profile, represented in profile, and you know why now, okay? As I said, Federico da Montefeltro will stay in history for his connection to the arts and for being a great leader in combat. However, his dynasty will be cut short because his son, who we'll probably talk about in the future, Guidobaldo da Montefeltro, he will be actually impotent. So that's where the dynasty is cut short. But and he will have an adoptive son, in fact, and his daughter-in-law will be Elisabetta Gonzaga, who will be also an incredible patron of the arts, who we'll talk about definitely in future videos. So insert picture here, because there's a very famous portrait of Elisabetta Gonzaga by Raphael. But so yeah, we're talking definitely, this is a period of great patrons and great lovers of philosophy, of arts, and of literature. So let me know if there's any more characters of this period you would like to know about, and if there's any portraits of people that you're like, oh, I wish I knew more about this person, so we can talk about them in the future.
I very liked the Botero version of this painting.
No.
I don't know if you have ever see that. It's really funny.
Okay, so I did not know that there was a Botero version of this painting, and Giacomo just introduced me to this. I had no idea. This is hilarious. Botero is the one that paints fat people. Okay, so I did not know that there was this version as well.